be getting started now, and make yourselves comfortable. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Bill.
Good evening, folks. Actually, can everybody hear me without the mic?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I thank you very much all for coming out this evening. I know your time is very precious, and it's hard to give up an evening, but I think this is a very important undertaking the town is going through. It's really going to give us a roadmap for where we want to be in the next 10 to 15 years, and I think it's just absolutely critical. We did one almost 20 years ago, and I've heard comments about it never being adopted, but one of the things that I point out to everyone is probably 85% of the recommendations of that plan have been initiated by the town. So, to me, that's a huge success. Unfortunately, between the writing of the document and the time that the town got it, we had a little event called 9/11, which kind of shook everything up. But I think we're off to a great start. We have an incredible committee that's been meeting every week now, every 2 weeks, for almost 2 months. They've been doing an outstanding job. We're very happy with being in, and we're excited about this. So thank you for coming out. Please continue the participation, because again, the more input we get, the better the plan we'll have. So, and with that, I will give you Kirk Ritchie.
Can you tell us your name, who you are, what you do, what he does?
My name is Bill McKenna. I'm the town supervisor. And I'm going to hand over the mic to Kirk Ritchie, who is the chair of our volunteer committee. So with that, Kirk, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks, Bill. I don't think I need a mic either. Can you hear me in the back? Great. All right, good. So again, my name is Kirk Ritchie. I'm the chair of the committee, the volunteer committee that's responsible for helping BHAN, whom you'll meet Michael Allen in a moment. And they have been hired to lead this effort that we are in. It's an important effort that we're in, as Bill pointed out. And so this is our first community meeting. And there'll be others throughout this process, and you'll learn about that through this presentation tonight. And I wanted to encourage people that were here to please sign in if you haven't. Now, the reason why we want you to sign in is we would like to know, just to keep an account of people that are here and where you're from and just your zip code. And that the reason why we're asking for emails is so that you can receive updates on this project. So that's the intent for the email address, and that's, again, is your option to choose. But enjoy the evening. Thank you for coming. And I'd like to introduce Michael Allen at this point from BHAN Consulting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I hope you can hear me. If you can't, just let me know. As said, my name is Michael Allen. I'm with BHAN Planning and Design. We're a land use planning firm in Saratoga Springs. We specialize in a lot of comprehensive plans, open space plans, and so forth that we've done throughout New York State. Joining me this evening also is Emily Gardner from Saratoga Associates. They are joining us on this project, and we're partnered on it to work together on it. I just want to give a quick overview of what we're going to be doing tonight. I think this is a very exciting opportunity right now. This is an important moment that doesn't come along very often in a community to update the comprehensive plan. And so I think it's an important moment to recognize that this is just starting out. We wanted to have this meeting to get the word out so people know that this update is occurring, so that you know we're looking for input at this point. And I'll give you an overview of what we're planning on doing going forward through the summer. I'm going to start out with sort of an introductory presentation just to give an idea of the background to all of this and what we're hoping to achieve. And then go over some of the existing conditions that we're starting to compile right now, sort of documenting a snapshot of where the community stands right now at this point in time. Then have a little discussion about some of the local issues and trends, not just here in Woodstock, but also nationally. There are things that are, I think, worth discussing as far as priming the discussion tonight. And then after that, I want to open it up to all of you, because one of the main points of this meeting is to start to get input from all of you. At this point, we're looking to get some input on what do you think are some of the main issues facing Woodstock right now that we should be aware of as we go forward to develop this comprehensive plan. So first of all, just so all of you know, question, what is a comprehensive plan? It's essentially a policy document that's supposed to guide the vision for a community, the long-term vision, if you will, and it outlines sort of the goals and policies that the town believes as a whole, as a community, we all believe in and should strive for. It often covers topics such as future land uses, demographics, protection of, what areas of town do you feel need to be protected because there are natural resources or so forth. Where areas of town do you feel that are desired for future growth? What areas of town do you feel shouldn't accommodate future growth? What sort of zoning changes you think the town should do, community amenities, things like that. It essentially acts similar to a constitution, if you will. Once a comprehensive plan is adopted, the town is obligated to then, any future changes that the town does, local laws or policies that it enacts, have to be in accordance with what the comprehensive plan says. So the town can't go and do something that runs contrary to the will of the people. And comprehensive plans such as this are put together with usually as much public input as possible. They're not written in a back room. The idea is to get the sort of democratic view of what the local residents feel should be the future for the town, and document that as best as possible in a single document. And comprehensive plans have to be updated periodically because of times change, technologies change, society changes, and so forth. And technically speaking, the last comprehensive plan that the town of Woodstock has adopted was adopted in 1962. There's obviously been a lot of community discussion and land use planning discussions that has occurred since then, but now it's time, and the town board feels very strongly that now is the time to sit down and take a look at where we are right now and what do we want the future to be. And so now it's time to take another step at documenting this and adopting it. So late last year, when the town board sat down to set us on this course, they set out a request to have consultants who would help the town answer these 4 questions. And these 4 questions are: where are we right now? Where are we going? Where do we want to be? And how do we get there? And this very simply and concisely sums up a lot of what it is that the comprehensive plan is all about. And we do comprehensive plans in many different communities around New York State, and I've always liked this because it's very straightforward and simple, and it really speaks to what the big picture is. Part 1, where are we now, is essentially the stage that we're at right now, is starting this process. This is essentially an existing conditions inventory of the town, a snapshot of what's going on in town. Where do we have, what are the land uses right now? Where are best natural resources? What are the demographics, the economics standards of the town? And also, what are some of the issues facing the community? These are part of what we want to get from you guys tonight. We're almost done with the inventory at this point. We're hoping to get any input from tonight about issues and incorporate it into that before we submit it to the advisory board. And part 1, once it's complete, will be posted online. I'll let you know where that is at the end of the presentation, so that everybody in the community can read up on it and follow it. Part 2, where are we going, is starting to look at some trends, doing an analysis of where do we think future development is likely to occur, how much development do we think is likely to happen, and try and make an assessment of, is this where the community wants to go, or do we need to make a course correction? It's really trying to project what our current course is as far as a trajectory. how do we think that these might affect the community in the future, and what can we learn from other communities who may be going through the same thing? We'll touch base on some of the more specifics of that in a moment. Likewise with part 1, part 2 is going to be, once that's done, going to be posted to the town website. Now, part 3, where do we want to be? This is where the rubber kind of hits the road, so to speak. This is the community visioning part, and I think probably the most important part of this process. That's where we're looking to have as much of the community come in and sit down and discuss what would you like the future of Woodstock to be? What do you imagine it to be? What would you like to see change? What would you like to see stay the same? And during that process, we're going to have a public workshop to get as many people in as we can, sit down around numerous tables where each table can have their own discussion, using some maps and other material to try and map out exactly what it is you would like to, what your ideas are and what your vision is for the community. And learning from that, we're hoping to also identify a couple of, I would say, bigger issues that might need a little bit more work than just one workshop. And we're hoping to identify those and afterwards have some focus groups where we might have a specific group sit down and drill down to in a little bit more detail on certain issues that we feel just can't be handled with one meeting. Afterwards, we're also looking to have a community survey. At this point, right now, we're looking to have a community survey after the workshop. There's 2 different ways to do this, and I'm not convinced which way we should do it yet. Right now, we're thinking from the public workshop, listen to what people have to say, identify some big things that we want to get some more detail on it from a larger audience of the whole community, and then use that to develop a community survey, send that out to the residents of Woodstock, and get that in and incorporate that into part 3. The alternative is, and I'm still debating which is the best way to do it, is to do the community survey first to get the word out about it and get as much input, and that will help inform how the public workshop is designed. Maybe we'll have to discuss that a little bit. Likewise with the other ones, part 3 will be posted online with the workshop results, all the input that we got from the workshop results, the survey, and so forth. And finally, part 4 is taking what we've learned about what the community vision is sitting down, looking at all the points that people have made about what they would like to see, and then figuring out what sort of policies or strategies should the town adopt in the short term or the long term to try and realize those strategies. At that point, we're going to take all 4 parts, part 1, 2, 3, 4, and compile them together into what would be the draft comprehensive plan. And at that point, we'll go through probably some edits as everything is merged together, but at that point we'd be looking to put it out there in the public and have a public hearing on it. As mentioned, we're working right now with a comprehensive plan committee chaired by Mr. Kirk Ritchie, who's right here. There's many other members of the committee here tonight. Their role is to work with us. As mentioned, they meet twice a week, every other week.
Twice a month.
Twice a month. That's the easier way of saying it. And they are basically providing guidance to us, also providing sort of local support on many of these issues, and reviewing any material that we put together for this. They're reviewing it, getting it back to us, and proposing edits and so on and so forth. Our main role as part of this is to try and learn as much as we can from you, to hear from the community what you would like to see as part of this comprehensive plan, and we can do the grunt work of starting to put it together. As far as the inventory documentation standpoint, we've got some of the maps so far up on the table, up on the wall, sorry. Basically, that's intended to document a lot of the existing conditions with regards to what are the existing land use patterns, what are the environmental features, historic features, watershed boundaries, recreation lands, and so forth that make up right now the snapshot of where Woodstock is right now. And we're also would be including with that some of the issues that we'll discuss tonight. With the land use patterns, you're looking at Woodstock, you have a lot of state protected land, which is very good. And then the sort of the yellow areas that you see here on the map are residentially used parcels. And as you'll notice, obviously because of the hilly terrain of the area, a lot of the development all follows the valleys in between the mountains. And that's where you see the concentrations of growth. The gray parcels are the essentially undeveloped vacant parcels right now, and there's quite a lot of them. Over time, I mean, part of the reason they're undeveloped right now is because they generally occur in the hillier areas. But even if you overlay a lot of the steep slopes with those vacant parcels, there's still a lot of land that has yet to be developed or could potentially be developed in the future. So time is going to, over time, a lot of these are going to be developed. This is the sort of the topographic map with looking at some of the steep slopes there. The steep slopes are obviously an impediment to development, but there's still a lot of area in the town which is open to development. This is a zoning map right now, as you see. And if you look, there's generally, historically speaking, you have a lot of smaller parcels over to the east side of the town. To the west side of the town, you have much larger parcels, and that's where a lot of the undeveloped land is. Over time, as the town grows, this is going to change, and you're going to have development, and that's barring a significant change in society. I don't see that's changing. Part of the comprehensive plan is recognizing that change is going to occur. This is an opportunity to speak up and say, well, if it's going to occur, this is where we would like it to happen, and this is where we would not like it to happen, and if it's going to happen, this is what we would want it to look like. So we're trying to plan ahead here for that issue. As far as some trends and issues that I want to sort of briefly touch on with the audience tonight, I think this is an important part to try and get a snapshot of what you're all seeing here. We can analyze maps and so on and so forth all day, but we want to hear what some of the issues are that only come from understanding, because you live here. Right now, the population sort of map of Woodstock. Woodstock experienced, as probably many of you know, a dramatic population increase through the 50s and 60s, peaking into the 80s. And then shortly after that, it began to decline a little bit, and since then it's steadied out. It's sort of, I guess, leveled out a little bit, if you will. Though still project that over time that's still going to slowly rise and grow. Looking at the national picture, what we're experiencing nationally is overall an aging population and shrinking household sizes. Senior citizens right now, as a share of the total population, are basically going to be increasing as part of the demographic shift. So as far as I would say with Woodstock, it's not so much as a population amount that is going to be changing, that is going to be a shift. I think what you're more likely to experience is more of a shift in the distribution of ages within the demographics. So right now, at the national level, we're expecting an increase of senior citizens to be about from 13% of the population up to about almost 20% by 2030. By 2030, it's expected that about a quarter of American households will have children under 18. There's going to be generally an increase in multi-generational households where you have grandparents living with their kids. Is that starting to be an increase, and also an increase in single-person households, and millennials also, generally born between, depending on who you ask, 96 to 2010, they're projected to be about 20% of the population at that time. So we're seeing a demographic shift, and it's interesting when you look at Woodstock right now, the demographics of Woodstock, the age distribution by population from 1980, 90, 2000, 2010. The dark blue, let's see if I get this right, the dark blue line right here, that basically represents the age group of 25 to 44. And if you follow it along here, you start to see that it's already been shifting. It's already been declining, that age group, just in Woodstock alone. And the same is true for all the age groups below it. So you have all of these are slowly becoming a smaller part of the population, relatively speaking, whereas the opposite is true of the age groups 55 and up. These are all rising, becoming a bigger part of the population locally. So in many ways, Woodstock this very much reflects what they're seeing at the national level, and in many cases I would argue that Woodstock is kind of ahead of the curve in many ways. As you'll see right here, looking at the town of Woodstock compared to the surrounding towns of Ulster County, as well as New York State as a whole, basically right now you already have experience where a greater amount of your population, a greater percentage of the population is of the older side. If you look at basically the younger generation from 44 years and below, in every category, Woodstock has a smaller percentage than you'd find in the surrounding towns, the county, and the state. But conversely, at the other end of the spectrum over here, from 45 on up, you already have a higher percentage of people who are older. So in many ways, Woodstock is already sort of ahead of the curve of this national trend. And I think this is important to consider when we get onto some of these other things. Understanding this, what does this mean for a community that wants to keep younger people in the community? It's, I think, interesting because the younger populations have always wanted to, or often want to, move out, go to cities, or so on and so forth. So you're already fighting against that reality. Younger generations are already moving to cities. They want to be with other younger people. It's going to be harder for Woodstock in some ways to try and keep those. This is an issue that many towns face, is keeping their younger generations in town and refreshing it. I think it's going to be even slightly harder for Woodstock, given some of these. An age-diverse community is very important. You don't want to have all of your eggs in one basket, much like you invest for your retirement portfolio. You don't want to put it all on, 37 Black. You want to diversify a little bit. So, having the diversification in the age population, I think, is an important thing to discuss. One thing is, what does Woodstock have, or what could Woodstock have that would help to keep younger generations here? And what might the community do also to address the fact that, barring a significant societal change in all of this, the truth is that the aging population is going to occur. What does Woodstock might want to do to plan for that? And it might be difficult for some of you in the room who, when you're thinking about the future, you're thinking, 5 or 10 years out. My job is to try and look, 20, 30, 40 years out, and so I'm a little bit more used to it. But I think it's an important thing to think about is how does Woodstock want to position itself for that in the future? From an economic standpoint, the general trend is increasing popularity right now at the national level as people are tending to like more walkable core neighborhoods versus, let's say, the suburbs and so forth. Baby boomers are increasingly, they're seeking walkable places, having easy access from where they live, which is now becoming, smaller, trying to simplify their living arrangements, walkable places, accessibility to the grocery store, health services, and so forth. Residential real estate is found, it doesn't appreciate as much or as often when it's not within proximity to like a core downtown or a village, much like you have right here in downtown Woodstock. Live-work options, less driving, are something that are becoming more apparent. Woodstock has a phenomenally high amount of self-employed people compared to many other parts of the area. It's rather impressive. This is part of that trend. Multifamily development is going to start to put more pressure on some of these downtown areas, and the focus is going to be providing them around public transit and near service centers. So as far as the baby boomer trends here, they're generally looking to, if we can generalize the stereotype here, generally looking to downsize and get out of the larger suburban homes into something smaller and easier to maintain, more convenient lifestyles. And conversely, the Gen Y market, that's considered a very large growth market in the sense that a lot of them are really focused on downtown suburban centers, mixed-use living, where they're around a lot of people. They don't want to be out in isolated areas. They want to be connected with lots of other people. So to that thought, multimodal connections in a community are very important. Allowing people to walk and bicycle and so forth on trails from the outskirts of a village or a town into the urban center is a big draw. It's very helpful toward, it's part of the healthy lifestyle that is becoming a lot more, I think, prevalent among a lot of people. So bike paths, trails, pedestrian improvements such as that are generally thought to be very beneficial, and they're starting to become not just more trendy, but they're actually helping a lot of communities become more sustainable, not just in the eco sense, but in the economic sense. Looking at sort of the statistics on rental prices and house prices, Woodstock has always been above average as far as rental prices. Looking at some of the surrounding towns of Olive, Kingston, Woodstock has always been pricier than them. From 1980, 1990, in that period there was a very huge increase in rent prices, up to almost 140 some odd % increase. Woodstock during that time had the lowest change. It had the least amount of rental inflation during that period, whereas the other surrounding towns were having much higher. They were starting to catch up to Woodstock. But still, Woodstock, and continuing on to the 2010-2015 period, Woodstock still has some of the highest rental prices. And something to keep in mind as far as, again, providing a diversity of housing, diversity of demographics. In the 2010 to 2015 period, that's just 5 years, not 10. The rental prices went up much more than, almost as much as Saugerties. So something to keep in mind is it's good that the Woodstock has a strong economic market in that sense, but I think it's important to keep in mind how rental properties are an important part of the demographic. As far as median housing value, likewise Woodstock, again, generally higher than a lot of surrounding towns, very, very good and healthy. Though recently it's been hit by a much more drastic change than a lot of its neighbors. So considerations with that are, the general cost of home ownership and rental with regards to this touches base on keeping the younger generations here in the area. Woodstock is also obviously partially a tourist economy. You have a lot of people who live here, which are second homeowners, and many local. One thing to keep in mind is a lot of the local businesses tend to cater more toward the tourist economy. And one thing to think about is how do we make sure that the community is still served by these local businesses, and they're not focusing too much on the tourism industry and not as much on the locals, to the end of, does the town have all of the services that they need as far as local supermarket, gas station, health services, and so forth. Something to discuss. Looking at development over time, this is a graph looking at all the building permits from 2006 to 2016. Varied quite widely. It was a big drop shortly, I think, after basically the housing market recession and so forth. But it's certainly coming back. But this is looking at all building permits, including everything from septics to septic systems and so forth. If you just look at new residential and commercial permits versus additions and renovations, The blue bars are the number of additions and renovations. The black bars are new residential and commercial. There's a lot more effort being put into, this is fairly common, but there's generally a lot more effort into putting in, reinvesting in the houses that we already have, the housing stock that Woodstock already has, reinvesting that money to improve those and modernize a lot of the aging housing stock, which is very good. And more specifically, if you just look at the top bar here, this is just renovations. Renovations tend to be starting to go up, which is a good sign. You're seeing a lot more of reinvesting in the existing housing stock versus building new. And also, if you look at, this is on the left-hand side, these are all the renovations from 2009 to 2016, and it goes down, everything from porches, decks, generators, septic systems, down on the line. New residential development is here, accessory apartments, and new commercial buildings. So as you see, there's a much bigger focus on those renovations than in the new commercial buildings or new residential buildings. From a standpoint of home occupancy, this is looking at the town of Woodstock compared to Ulster County versus New York State. Generally, Woodstock has a much higher percentage of owner-occupied housing than either the surrounding county or the state. And likewise, correspondingly, as you might imagine from the mathematics of it, the percentage of renter-occupied is correspondingly lower than that. If you take 100% of the housing stock and it's either rented or owner-occupied. So compared to the area, generally has less rental apartments available. However, it do have a noticeably high vacancy rate or seasonal rate. I don't know exactly how those are categorized, but it gets into this next period. Looking at short-term rentals, such as, say, Airbnbs, they're becoming increasingly popular and increasingly part of the tourism economy. This is a map just of registered Airbnbs in and around the immediate Woodstock area. And this isn't even the whole town. So you see the red dots are basically the whole house, the blue dots being the partial homes available. It shows the prevalence of it everywhere. This has an impact. Airbnb and those things are great for some people, depending on who you ask, and they're awful for others because they have an impact on the housing market. They take housing away from people who would otherwise be using it here locally and actually living here. If you look at a graph of just the Airbnb rentals since 2008 to today, it's climbing quite drastically. And now I project that will eventually top out and level out, but I don't know exactly where and how far it will go before it starts to level out. So I think for at least the short term, we can expect that trend is going to continue and is going to increase. So the idea of online short-term rentals is kind of a game changer in that sense because it can have a big effect on the local housing market population. And communities all around are facing the same thing. We're facing it in Saratoga Springs. I know in Lake Placid, they're dealing with it up there. They have people building 8-bedroom houses with 7 baths, and they're just doing it to just make it a permanent Airbnb thing. And so they're trying to write legislation to try and figure out how to deal with that. In our city, we're trying to do it, and here in Woodstock, the town board is currently working on trying to figure out a best way to approach that, and it's complicated. There is nobody's yet found the silver bullet for figuring out the right way to massage it and make it work. Just some statistics that we got from as far as Airbnb rentals here in the Woodstock area. I can't vouch for how these numbers are put together, but what they're saying is, a lot of these are generally rented for up to 10 to 12 months. The majority are rented for 10 to 12 months. And I believe or at least are available for rent for that period of time and are rented for 1 to 3 months. So this has an impact on things. One other idea is, or topic of discussion is that of climate change and disaster preparedness. This is photo from Prattsville, New York. You probably know Hurricane Irene came along, dumped several inches of rain into their mountainous area, not unlike this area, and the valleys channeled all that water right down in and wiped out their downtown. So, it's not dissimilar from a lot of the topography here. Woodstock has, some areas of flooding or flood zones throughout. Something to think about that a lot of communities are doing is trying to prepare for, okay, if and when something like this might happen, what do we do to prepare for it as far as mitigating how much damage it might do, as far as limiting growth in certain areas that we know might get hit and so forth. So severe weather is becoming a larger issue. I know from my experience, the FEMA flood maps, they're not getting any smaller, they're only getting bigger. Every time they release the new maps, the flood zones just get a little bit bigger. So it's something to try and keep in mind. Many communities are trying to look at this, and one question is what might Woodstock want to do just in terms of sustainability or climate change to try and promote a more ecological footprint with regards to renewable energy? Do you have thoughts on trying to energy savings and so forth? So looking forward, what are some of the other issues that we want to talk about tonight? I don't know if they're parking and traffic or so forth. I want to hear from you guys. We're going to be compiling all of the comments that we get and posting them online. I'll give you the website. It's basically the town website. As I mentioned, we're going to be posting draft part 1 inventory once that's available, and then after that, draft part 2 trends will be available. And that's when, at that point, we'll have that information available for the next public meeting. The public workshop, we haven't scheduled a date yet, but we're looking, I'm guessing it's going to probably be sometime in August. This is our schedule, schedule that we've got right now. Parts 1, 2, 3, 4. Where are we now? We're completing the existing conditions inventory right now. The next step right now is, I think we're starting to get into the trends analysis. Tonight is the first public meeting, which is happening tonight. We're going to be probably completing the trends analysis in July. The next step of where do we want to be, that's the visioning part of the future. We're looking to have the public workshop focus groups probably, we're guessing, sometime in August. And after that, well, as I said, it might flip, and then the community survey shortly afterwards. And then once we have all that information, sitting down and trying to figure out strategies of how to get there, and what strategies do we want to do to implement some of these things. And that's going to be in December, before the end of the year is our target. So we want to discuss what your thoughts are. I don't know if you know, we had some sample questions up there just to sort of get people's minds going, as if you probably didn't already come here with lots of things to talk about already. If you want to just write in some answers to those, that is fine. Otherwise, in just a minute, we're going to ask people to take questions, and I guess you're going to MC this. And so basically the main question is, what issues do you see facing Woodstock that you feel we should try and take into account as we start to go through some of this work? And I guess that's it. Do we want to just, how do you want to take the questions here?
Yeah, I think, well, first, Jay, before you go, you want to speak, will be the first speaker.
All right.
And, and we have mics if you need one. And we'll just start out with Jay. And anyone else, if you'd like to raise your hand once Jay is completed, or we'll figure it out as we go. Jay?
Thank you. Thank you. One of the very last things that was flashed up on the screen was the impacts to the town from environmental disasters. And I can say immediately that a problem that we have and will continue to have is that I imagine that Central Hudson does not take down the trees that are dangling over the wire lines, the power lines, the telephone lines, until there's a big storm, usually in the middle of the night, in the middle of the winter. And if we could get Central Hudson to do a job constantly about that, that would be wonderful. I think the main thing I wanted to say is that Woodstock needs, right now, a jitney surface that will, I'm not competent to lay out the schedule or the maps or whatever, but everybody knows that we have a very limited amount of parking on the streets, and there's a little bit more available parking in the two parking lots that we have here, which are free, by the way, to all residents. You don't pay at any time. We do have a very minimal charge that visitors to the town pay. But we need a jitney service that will provide transportation to residents and to visitors all around the perimeter and the detailed roads of the town. Another thing I'd like to say is that the point was raised earlier that change is coming. Yes, we all know that change happens. And the question that you raised, sir, was where will it be put or where will it go? That's not the question. The question is what kind of change? We have to deal with the kinds of change first, and then the answers to that will be obvious, because once we know what the change is that we want, then we know where to put it. And finally, I need to read this because I wrote it down. When the survey that you are planning goes out, how do you make sure that your survey is a solid cross-section and statistical sample of the community? That's a question for you guys. And the follow-up question is, what types of analysis will you be performing on that survey or surveys? So that's the extent of my comment.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
And, Michael, I don't know if you want to answer any of those questions specifically about the survey, but I wanted to mention one thing about what Jay was asking about, and that is that are we reaching every area of the town? And with the surveys and with our efforts. And I think that the short answer to that is absolutely. We are not interested in just hearing from those areas of the town where there's lots of money and lots of activity and lots of, we want to reach every single person in this town. We want to hear what's valuable, what's important to them and their priorities. So the effort is to go to every zip code, every area, every neighborhood. That's our sincere effort as the committee. And so the survey, the focus groups, the reaching out will be, the attempt will be to reach the entire town. I don't know if that's satisfactory to you, but I think that, Michael, you might want to have some answers to, or some response to some of the other Jay's question. And you have a question, but we'll get to that after Michael responds.
Yeah, I think in general, I'll try and, unless you want, to keep things going. I'm not going to answer every question unless you really want me to. But in general, as far as, I think you already covered as far as the statistical, we'd like to blanket as much as everybody as possible. We haven't figured out a lot of the details of how the survey is going to work yet. We're going to be working with the committee on that. But the idea is to try and make it as accessible as possible. So not only are we targeting people through mailings, but also making it available online. And at the end, the idea is to then merge those two data sets from the paper and the online into one. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. We haven't worked out all the design details of how that's going to be done. And as far as what types of analysis we're going to be doing, I guess that's going to depend on some of the questions. At the very least, we're going to be taking all the survey results and making them, all that information public, so everybody can see what was said. And what sort of analysis we do, I guess, is going to depend on what type of questions we ask. So.
Thank you, Michael. We have a question in the front row here, and then Laura.
Yes, I just was going to comment just, it does seem better to do the survey before the workshops and the participation so that you can shape what you're working with the
Here,
community
use the
on.
mic because people in the back can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Your comment is, go ahead.
It does seem, like you were saying, to maybe make sense to first survey the community before you set up workshops and engage the community. Right?
That's, I think Michael pointed out that, do we use the survey to lead into the workshop, or do we use the workshop to lead into the survey? And that's something that, your opinion at this point, you're expressing that you would like to see the survey feed into the workshop.
I also think it could get you more public participation.
If we
And a
have
better
survey on. Right.
result in the long run if you survey
point.
first.
Thank you.
Right.
Laura? And please, I'll give you the mic so the entire room can hear you.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
had a couple of questions. One, I totally enjoyed your presentation. And will you give that to the town to post on the town website?
Yes, it's not until a later slide, that's why I haven't said it yet. But yes, this presentation, a copy of this, I'm going to be given to the town tomorrow when I get back to the office. I made some edits to it tonight, so when I get back to the office, I will send that to. And also, once all of our notes and everything are compiled, we're going to put those on the town website too. So,
Okay, and I have a list of questions.
One more thing I wanted to mention to that, Laura, before you too, is that this presentation will also be given to, as you maybe have noticed, we're videotaping this event right here now. And the presentation will be given to Dave so that he can marry the presentation with the video. And so that'll be available on channel 23 very soon, right? In a little bit of time. So
And probably also streamed from the website too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay. The next question, I was kind of surprised when I saw your community meetings page because you indicated the first meeting was going to be a part 2 thing, but we're really only in part 1 because even though I saw you talk about trends, I didn't see you tell where we're going. I saw you give trends of how we got to where we are, but I didn't really see a part 2 answer yet. I didn't see where we're going of course.
yeah, that's a bit of a misnomer the way we originally mapped out how this was going to go. Technically speaking, we're still in part 1, but this workshop was scheduled to be in part 2. It's a bit of an order thing. The schedule slipped a little bit. We're a couple of weeks behind, so that's why things
I think it's still right. I don't have any issue with that. I just was noting that I didn't think I saw part 2 yet, but that's fine. I didn't miss anything. It's good. Okay. The next thing, I'm Laura Rickey, a member of the town board. Kathy Magarelli, another member of the town board, is here. On the page of who's on the Comprehensive Plan Volunteer Committee, it was complete, but Kathy and I are liaisons. We're the town board liaisons. Just that I mentioned that Kathy Magarelli and I are the official town board liaisons to the committee, which is doing a fabulous job. We see it every time we come to a meeting, including Kirk. So.
Okay, my apologies. Okay, I can update that.
Yeah, no problem. One other comment that as you were showing the demographics through the years and the big spike in 1950 and the decline since late 80s, I do think that IBM had something to do with that.
Yes.
As you probably know, IBM came in the mid-50s,
Yes.
and some of the people bought houses here. IBM left in 94, and it was declining. So I do see it, as we say, what can we in Woodstock do? Just keep in mind that part of what caused the growth in the past was a very large company putting 7,000 employees here, and I'd love to see us be able to keep all that. But anyway, I just wanted to raise that point. I was interested in your Airbnb comment, and this is the last topic, by the way. Anyway, I was interested in your Airbnb comments, interested in the registered quote-unquote Airbnb I know they're not registered with the town of Woodstock, they're registered somewhere, I guess, but I was curious where your numbers came from.
The data that we got is from a company called AirDNA, and they do basically statistics on Airbnb. So I believe when they're saying registered, they're saying you have an active, they call it active accounts or registrations. So it's, I believe, if I understand, I had a disclaimer in there, it's not my data, so I can't vouch for it, but I believe that's meaning these are active Airbnb accounts.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's what the word
Because
registration
you were the term registered. Oh, okay, so I was just curious about that. And interested to hear more, because that's a big issue, as I'm sure you've heard, that we're dealing with here. So that's it.
Just as a follow-up, one of the things I want to do, I haven't done it yet, is to look at those same Airbnb statistics for surrounding communities, and also where I live, to just check and see how accurate it is. But I think it would be just showing it just for Woodstock in a vacuum doesn't give us much information. I'd like to show it. How does it compare to other towns or in the area? So
Yeah, that'd be great. I agree, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. Question? Yes. Let me bring it back to you.
Well, there's really more of a comment than a question. I had two issues, walkability and energy. So one of the great assets of Woodstock is its walkability. This weekend, I was near a house, a pedestrian was run over, as I understand it, on the pedestrian, on the crosswalk. She's okay, but she was knocked over. I'd like to see enforcement of the pedestrian crossing. I'd like to see real effort go into improving the walkability. Yeah, that's one thing. The second thing is in terms of energy. I'd like to see some real focus in the plan in regards to energy for heating, for electricity, for cooling. This building, the town is leading by example. This building, the highway garage, the police station, the courthouse, they're all using heat pumps and some solar electric. I would like to see some serious thought given in this comprehensive plan as to how, if commercial buildings are coming up for permitting, that there be at least a requirement that they look at alternatives to the default, which is burning oil and propane.
Thank you, Dermot.
okay.
Your name?
Ira Nirenberg, I live here in Woodstock, and just over that way.
Okay.
I think that what you guys are doing is very exciting and encouraging. I'm a 4.5-year resident of Woodstock, and you can't love it anymore. The building a comprehensive plan is as complicated as building a rocket ship or a house or a hospital. And so there's a lot of aspects that go into it. My original training, I'm an architect, so I understand a little bit about how you get from point A to Z. Not everybody will always be satisfied by the end result, clearly. The fact that you're asking for everybody's input is very exciting to me. Just so happens I'm going to be around the whole summer so I can contribute what little I can. But I think it's a very exciting thing, and you're off to a great start, and I'm very excited about it.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone? Questions, comments? Dan?
I'd like to add to Sherman's comments about walkability, that I would also like to see better bike lanes. I live an easy walk of town, but I'm taking my life in my hands to either walk. I take my life in my hands to either walk, which is a short distance from my home into town, or especially the bicycle is very dangerous.
Right. Thank you, Dan. Comments, questions?
On that subject, I'd like to add that I'd like to see this town more handicapped. I'd like to see this town more handicap friendly. A lot of the sidewalks are difficult for chairs to use because they're too bumpy. There's a lot of buildings that don't have ramps because they're older, or they have ramps and they're not in good condition, etc. And it'd be really neat if this town was more handicap friendly.
Thank you. What's your name?
I'm Linda from Woodstock.
Okay, thank you.
In regards to where are we going, I've been here about 20 years, and over the past couple of years, one of the things that has happened is the noise factor, which is a big major part where I'm at. And that's going to increase the amount of traffic and everything is going to increase. I currently own an apartment building, and about 2 years ago, some of you have heard about Mescal's. A bar opened up a couple of buildings over. I was not advised or in any way informed that there was going to be bands there. There are numerous tenants that live there, and on a regular basis, not just on the weekends, but during the weeknights, there's bands playing, and try to hear your TV or sit down to a bar dinner and all this. And somehow the town has no control over this. Now, is any of this growth that the town going to be able to control it? Our quality of life is going to be affected by a lot of this new movements. And a lot of us came here from downstate the city, and we came up here because of all the woods, the beauty, the quietness, and that. I mean, a lot of that's going to be gone.
What's your name?
My name is Angelo Toba.
Angelo, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Anyone? Comments, questions? Kathy?
I just want to introduce myself. I'm Kathy Nagarone. I'm on the town board. Just so you know, the town's seriously looking at solar. We almost put a project in, it just didn't work out, but we are not forgetting about that. We are seriously looking at what we can do to do better energy for the town itself. So that's something we're looking at, and it will be in the comprehensive plan. The other thing is, years ago, we looked into the bike paths. It's really tricky around here because we almost have to take over property from people to put bike paths, say, along Blockman or some of the larger roads like Glasgow, because there's just not enough room in a lot of spots. But it's something we could look at with a comprehensive plan and try and figure out, how we can get bike paths in this town. But I think part of the solution might have to be, moving a lot of electric poles and taking over a few feet of property along the roads. So it's something we could look at, but it's an issue.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone? Another gentleman back here speak first.
My name is Paul Van Wagner. I'm relatively newcomer here, 77 years, 1941. The traffic, the pedestrian walkers, walk-facing traffic. Walk-facing traffic. I stop people all the time. I live over on Millstream, over by Millstream, by the motel. People come out of there, walk with the traffic. Very dangerous. I stop and ask people to walk on the other side of the street. Maybe everybody should do that. Tell people to walk facing the traffic.
Yeah, you learned that in kindergarten.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, there are too many.
Maybe not everybody went to kindergarten. Thank you for that. I think to that comment, and we'll get to that comment, I think there's a part of, in my opinion, if you'll allow me, the pedestrian safety and the bike safety ties into an overall safety education and awareness to drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. Everybody needs to be made aware of the safety factors, not just the pedestrians, not just the bicycles, and not just the drivers. So we need to somehow have an education component, if you will, to what it feels like to be a pedestrian in this town, to what it feels like to have a car go by you 10 miles over the speed limit, and what that is. So just more of a sense of raising awareness, right? We have a comment back here. What's the raised hand?
Question is, because I do notice that people drive really fast on Glasgow and the local roads just outside.
Please use your mic. So people can hear what you're saying.
I just noticed that people drive very fast outside Woodstock. I mean, we can look at a community plan within Woodstock, but is there any effort to talk to other communities around Woodstock to make sure that what we want to do fits with what they're doing? So we're not just a pocket. But the terms of speed that people drive seems to be a county issue. But people down in Glasgow are going 60 miles an hour. Even if we had a bike path, you're going to not run.
Right.
So 212 and
Kirk, go ahead.
John Bell.
John Val, in your early part of your presentation, you were talking about the population, the growth of the town. One thing that I didn't hear mentioned was the shift in the population. I mean, it's impression of some of us that a lot of that shift, especially when it comes to the static population, or the population that the census is going to count, shifted because a lot of the newcomers are not permanent residents. So therefore, that shifts those statistics dramatically. It makes it look like the town's losing population or maybe diminishing, while some of us that, as Paul said, have lived here for more than a year and a half, are somewhat doubtful of. So I would say that maybe putting that factor into your graphs, if you can somehow determine a percentage of people who don't live here. Many years ago, there was this, back in the 80s, we did a brief analysis of looking at how many people were registered to vote here, homeowners, versus some other location. And at that time, we came up with a number close to 40% of this town. Now, I don't know what that number is today. The assessor is sitting next to me. Maybe he can give us a number. As far as how many of our tax bills go out of town.
Okay, well, that's a good point.
Thank you for holding the information back.
Well, thank you. We got that noted.
Hi, Maxine, resident, building on John's comment. So to me, also with the recognition that there are so many weekenders living here, and what age they might be, as a cohort, let's say they're 40 years old or whatever, does that mean 20 years later they plan on living here full time? Like, how do you get to assess the intention or the trends of that group? So.
Okay.
Good question. And we had another comment about asking this question about how the people that live here, who are they? You know, do they spend all their time here, part of their time? You know, something of that nature along that line, right? Yeah. Comments, questions? We have one. Oh, again, we have a repeat.
So is this comprehensive plan for Woodstock for just the little town of Woodstock?
The entire town of Woodstock. The entire town of Woodstock.
So that begs, or I think part of the answer to some of these other questions are, when a bar has a band that makes noise, that's part of a zoning issue. And that could be a town rule that says bands can't play past X number, whatever time at night, at a certain level, decibel level. Because I feel for people like that. I've had that in my past life. But other issues of, walkers and traffics and music and architectural character, those are some of the questions that have to be asked and hopefully answered by the final or draft version of a document that then gets reviewed, whether it's there's the meeting before or the survey before,
right?
The cart before the horse. It's so hard, maybe have to go simultaneously, but I think that's, all of those things can be answered by a comprehensive plan.
Great, thank you. Yes, Laura. We have another repeat.
I was waiting for John Bill's first. So another topic I don't think I've heard mentioned, but because of the aging senior population, full cell coverage, I heard about that just at a town meeting the other day, because especially with the aging population and the parts of the town of Woodstock, which includes everything on that map, right? The hamlet of Woodstock's that little thing in there, but the whole map is the town of Woodstock. People who live away from the center of town, it's more and more important that their cell phones work for emergency purposes. And seniors, so many people are giving up their landline. Cell service is more important than ever.
Right. Thank you, Laura. There's some things related to that, but we certainly will be doing a study on the telecommunications of this town, along with some of the other broadband issues and access. I just sum it up as that access. We have a comment in the back.
No,
Jerry, I'll get back to you. Yes?
I was going to say that it is broadband, or I mean, there are other ways that it can be accomplished than having cell phone.
Yeah, broadband is
connection.
one.
Broadband is a better way. Wi-Fi, we should really consider that to be something that wouldn't cost us very much money, and everybody would have access.
Thank you. Okay. And Chair, was that you I heard?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the discussion on population is very important to me, and I've been looking at it for some time. There is a valley in the 24 to 40 age groups, and I put it as Woodstock is a dying community because our older populations are clustered in the 50s, 60s, and 70 groups. 50% of our population is over 50, and we don't have a very large population that can move up and into that giving birth area, if you will, of the 20s to 40s time frame. We have a situation where we have second homeowners, and if you look at the STAR reports and what have you, we've got, and they're larger than this, but we have about a net 1,500 parcels, buildings, livable buildings, that have these second homeowners. So one of the things I think the comprehensive plan has to look at to see is how can we bring these people who've already purchased homes and live here on a temporary basis, how do we make them permanent party and a voting person in the community? They're paying their taxes now, but they really don't have a say in what goes on.
And they don't have a personal stake in a lot of the stuff that happens because they're often not here.
Well, we have a personal stake. We need to develop some way of getting them to want to be members of the community, either by offering prizes or asking them to communicate more, so and or talk to them. Because I've talked to a number of them, and it's as simple as, gee, I'd like to have some coffee shops in town because I like to walk. They're New York City people. They like to get out and walk in the community, and they'll stop and have a cup of coffee here and there, and that's their life. That's what they want. Just as a matter of interest, the Woodstock Golf Club, 40% of the members of the Woodstock Golf Club are second homeowners. And which says that they are a mainstay in the community, but we're not doing very much to make them stay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And I don't know if you've noticed, but and we'll get to the comments, but I just want to point out that Michael is standing here writing, Emily is standing here writing, so we're capturing everything. It's also being recorded. So your comments are important. So please, your comment.
I don't think I need a microphone.
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Nels Leader. I'm a resident of Woodstock and a business owner in Woodstock through Woodstock Meats and Bread Alone. And first of all, I take slight as a comment that there are coffee shops in Woodstock. I like to think that Woodstock Meats and Bread Alone make good coffee. So in any case, I have a few comments. First, I want to thank Bill and Kirk and the volunteer committee, everyone that got us to this night. It's clear you guys have put a lot of work into this, and I think we're very fortunate to be in the position as a community to participate, so thank you for that. Second, I know a lot of the demographic trends point to sort of like a declining or an aging or a sleeping town. And I just want to say, as someone who lives here and has been here for the past 5 years, that maybe those demographic data don't show what's been happening the past few years, but the town really feels alive. And there's a lot of young people that aren't just part-timers here, but that are full-timers here. So as we push forward, I want to make sure we don't get stuck in the numbers and lose sight of the fact that this town really feels vibrant and growing. So let's not get too bogged down on some of those demographic info. And then finally, on a related note, I know there's going to be a lot of opportunities to get into the weeds and nitty-gritty of Airbnb and the new parking lot at Daniel Road, and how do we deal with transportation and cell service. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Woodstock is an incredible place. Like we all came here for access to nature or access to close proximity to the city, the history of arts and culture. There's so many great things that we have going for us in this town. So as we push forward, I think we should realize we have this great base to start with, and we're all as a community here for that same collection of reasons. So whatever the result is, I know that working together as a group, that common bond, and that great tradition are going to allow us to have a really great result. So let's not get too bogged down in the nitty-gritty right away, and remember that this is a great town.
Thank you very much for that.
Toward his comment, that is a very good comment. I mean, yeah, speaking as an outsider, I value, Woodstock has a reputation. It's got a draw, and when my wife knew I was coming down here tonight, she was disappointed that she couldn't go with me because she wanted to come down and bring the kids and walk around and show them. So, I mean, that's an excellent point. You have that cash, you have that certain je ne sais quoi that a lot of other towns they just don't have that little spark. And so that's something to try and keep in mind. What is that, and how do we build on that?
Thank you, Michael. And we have some time left, but I want to make sure that people, I know we have a comment over here, I'm going over there, Eric, I'll be there in a minute. But I just want to, let's continue to take advantage of this time. I think we'll be wrapping up soon or thereabouts, but please, keep the comments coming.
I want to talk a little bit about the coffee shops. I agree, there are a lot of coffee shops in town. But what I am interested in the development is the comprehensive plan, trying to find out what people really want in terms of new businesses or shops in the town, and what can actually serve the town best, as opposed to throwing in some kind of shop that no one particularly wants. I don't even know how one goes about regulating that. But that's something that I'm really interested in.
Well, I know that some towns have thank you, Eric. Some towns have taken an inventory whether the shops in town are catering or actually their inventory caters to the needs of the residents. You know, there's a local economy efforts that have occurred because we live in a town where, more than 50% of the homes are second homes. So, and the amount of people that come into town every weekend, majority of them are here to visit, right? And of course, all those businesses need to stay alive, so what are they going to cater to? But in the meantime, what are we doing to go get the daily necessities that we have, right? Our town needs to provide that, right? And we have great food services, but we also lost a grocery store, some 10 years ago, right, or more than that. And there's been adjustments to that, and there continues to be adjustments to that, but and the local businesses have really stood up and really flourished and filled that gap for us, and we appreciate that. But those are the kinds of things we want to make sure that we continue to make our community serve our needs. We don't want our community to become what is known as a dark community, meaning the people who work here don't live here. That's what this comprehensive plan will seek to avoid, because that's important. We had John Abrams come here some years back, as any of you may recall, during an effort we had some years ago, and he was from a town that went dark, and he was talking about how to avoid that. He was from Martha's Vineyard, and where 80%.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, 80% plus are second homeowners, and just very. The town struggles because of that. We need to control that so that we don't reach that state ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So, any comments? We have another one here, so... Yes.
I'll try to do it without a microphone.
What's wrong with the mics?
All the cool kids are using no mics. But, so I'm a friend of Nels and also one of the owners at Woodstock Meats. In fact, I came to the town largely because of the opportunity to purchase that market, but also because of my very good friend Nels. And so I'll tell you just a little bit about my experience coming here. And I'm able to live here largely because I have access to infrastructure that allows someone like me to not only, own a market, but work remotely. And so I currently work in a very small co-working space that's in the middle of town on Tannery Brook Road. And I work in a very small building with a film producer, a web designer, a sports agent, and a guy that does industrial design. And it's like 6 of us in this little house. I kind of have to work there because if I were to work out of my home in Willow, I would probably lose connectivity and service. In fact, the folks that I work for during the week almost required me to not work in that location because I would constantly drop calls and such. And so I can tell you, as someone who's just moved here, that the services that allow someone like a freelancer to do their business on a day-to-day basis it's probably one of the most critical ways that you can attract people to the town to not only come here on the weekends, but to live here full-time. It's a different world on some level that we live in, where you can have a very high-paying job and not have to necessarily be located in the same place where your headquarters is, maybe in New York City or, in fact, Denver, which is where my company is based. And so I'd say that's one of the keys that brought me here. The other has to just do with the natural resources that we have. And so I'd say that it's critical for me to have, me being a guy like me, to have access just to the natural beauty of the area. And for me, that's just an active culture, whether that's, that's biking on the streets or mountain biking, or access to water, being able to swim or being able to use the streams. We all know how beautiful our streams are, and just protecting that and making that accessible to the community, I think it just adds to the allure of the place. That's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Do you have a shoulder?
Pardon?
I don't.
Well, let's go.
I will say one statistic that I saw up there, though, which is encouraging, is that if you look at the bar charts, while it's discouraging from the point of view that there's this aging population, I did notice that there's a small segment of younger folks where we're not quite as far behind the other cities and the state, which is in some ways an encouraging trend. And I noticed that as well. The folks in our demographic, there's some little pops running around. I think that's great.
Absolutely. Great, thanks. Before we go back to you, I want to open it up to people who haven't spoken yet. Anyone? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, go right ahead. I'm David Eckroth. I'm chair of the Commission for Civic Design, aka the Design Police. This is deja vu for me because Jerry Washington and I and some others worked for 2 years from 98 to 2000 on a comprehensive plan, the draft, which was submitted to the town board and was shelved. But I'm much more optimistic now, given the energy in this room and what I think is good consultants here, that this will move forward into a real comprehensive plan. The town needs a comp plan for a lot of reasons, including the possibility of achieving grants. Now, in civic design, we're concerned about the design of the streetscapes, buildings, the adherence to the Historic Preservation Overlay District, which is Mill Hill, Tinker, and part of Rock City Road. We're concerned about colors and lighting and landscaping and all kinds of things. And most times when we review cases of people who are going to do new construction or renovations, additions, most of the cases work pretty well. Most of the applicants are civil, and we work together as a team to make for better projects. So we're concerned about that. Streetscapes, a lot of items tonight have been mentioned. Sidewalks, pathways, very important part of streetscapes. Town of Catskill got a community development block grant some years ago. And individual building owners on the main street each received, as I recall, $15,000 to $20,000 to improve the facades of the buildings. And I think that would be a good thing for Woodstock to do with a comp plan. You'd have a much better chance of achieving that.
Yeah, can I respond to that, Chris?
I guess so.
My turn, perhaps.
Yeah, Dave, thank you, Dave.
So I do agree with everything David said, but I just want to point out that one of the differences between this and the 2000 plan is I think you also have a town board who is committed. There's energy in the room. We have a wonderful committee led by Kirk. We have a great company who is helping us reach that objective. But I know myself as a town board member, I am committed to seeing this get approved. I was on the planning board. The planning board is instructed to make your decisions in concert with the currently approved plan. And there's along besides the reasons you mentioned, there's a lot of reasons to get this done. I know I'm committed to seeing it through the completion of approval, and I believe every town board member who, I saw them all here tonight, is also committed. So I do believe that something else is going to get this to the end game.
Great, Laura, thank you. I just want to add to that, and the Comprehensive Plan Committee is making an effort to bring all of the comprehensive plans forward, meaning that the details and issues that they're acknowledged, that they're incorporated into our thinking present, our present thinking. So it's not that the efforts that have occurred in the past are being, ignored. They are not. They're being reviewed, they're being looked at, and there's efforts to incorporate some of the elements that are still relevant to us today to be brought forward. Okay? Any other comments, questions? We have a couple more. Yes? And then we'll come back to it.
Just a quick comment on the driving speeds. They have shown by study that the feedback loop created by one of those boxes that just display your current speed is the most cost-effective way for a community to lower traffic speed. Really effective. So I did notice on the graphs that the new build is actually increasing kind of pointedly recently, despite population drop and aging population. I would really like us to put a focus on reinvesting in what we already have, fixing our moldy houses on the flats, getting people to come here and stay here, maybe creating green energy jobs locally, maybe having the community focus on that. And also you mentioned that the new plan would be a constitution. I guess we already have one. I guess there's a lot of things in our planning materials, in materials available online and elsewhere. I'm just wondering about the oversight of such things. It sounds great. We want to preserve our natural resources. We want to prevent disasters. We want to plan for hurricanes and watersheds. But what is going on when it comes to making sure that we are currently working within the standards we have? Are we using our best practices? Are we using the materials that we are stating that we are using? Are we using what we could use to steer our community towards the future? I have an auditing background. It just seems that the systems and the feedback of making sure that what we say we're doing is being done is not actually occurring. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we, as a town, we have a very strong zoning board, we have a very strong planning board, and some towns that don't even conduct comprehensive plans because of the strength of that zoning, correct? But this town is extending into this project because in spite of the strength that exists in the planning board and that exists in enforcing the regulations that already exist. So there is, I think, a very strong sense of self in this town already, and the governance of this town is in place. But this comprehensive plan is a look forward. So if there's ways in which we could,
I think we could improve.
we certainly do better.
I think we could.
And we have just gentleman here would like to another comment, and then we'll conclude.
I think it's great that we have a lot of young guys like you compared to me. My son's probably your age. He's an entrepreneur and doing quite well, and comes up many weekends to my house. But one of the things is not everybody's an entrepreneur, not everybody's well-educated, not everybody has the get up and go that you guys have had that brought you here. And this is probably a dirty word, but in a comprehensive plan you have to look at something called industry. And that industry doesn't have to be, coal burning power plants. There are lots of industries that have well-paying jobs, opportunity for people to move up in time. So if you get a high school kid, they go through a training program and gets a job that starts out at $15 an hour. By the time it's 30, you can be making $35 an hour and so forth, and can do work that ends up going back to New York City or up to Albany or elsewhere. We have the land. It's just the word industry should be looked at as part of a comprehensive plan.
Absolutely is, and will be, continue to be. Just a little point, in the 60s, Woodstock had more manufacturing jobs in the 60s than any other town in the entire county of Ulster County. And so certainly has been a change, and there needs to be an understanding of the emphasis of industry, as you say, and the business, we need employers. We need employers. So that's certainly a part of the comprehensive plan, our effort. You had a comment.
I'm Beverly Harris, I live in Lake Hill. 3 things. First, I'd like to thank everybody who brought this evening here together. It's really great. Secondly, I found out about this evening from the Woodstock Land Conservancy sending me an email this morning. I think we need to send out postcards to every owner, resident of Woodstock so more people come. And third, if we get the 40% who own the second homes, they are not tourists. I saw that up there. That's not correct. They're owners. If we want to get them involved, and I think we certainly do, then we need to let them know that we're meeting and have meetings when they can be here, which is on the weekends.
Right. We won't always be holding our meeting on Thursday.
And I also agree with what this gentleman said. We need to get new blood in this town, a little younger, not so white hair. And so...
We're already praying, don't look at us.
But we need to get more people like you to talk and say what we're bringing here.
Great. Beverly, thank you. It's good to see you again. All right. Richard.
Hi, Richard Heckner, town historian, town board member. On the history part, and I'm going to talk to the committee later in the summer about historic preservation of town. But historic preservation doesn't just mean buildings. Part of Woodstock is our sense of community. That's our history. We've always gone through a lot of changes. Now, those changes are brought about in many respects by diversity. Your arrival of the artists, arrival of young people in the 60s, those types of things. And I worry about, and I think Mike said it earlier, if you can't afford to live in this town, how can you work in this town? And that's going to be an interesting thing in the next 20 years. I hope we can look more at that. As far as that ability to live here, we are looking, as a town board member, we are looking, and one of the things I've taken on is just beginning to look at the Airbnb issue in town and how we can not stop it or do terrible things to it, but how we can work a balance, right? So that the people who plow our roads and those types of folks, coach our little league teams, can also afford to live in this town. And so if we work that balance, I think we can maintain that diversity. Otherwise, we do become a bunch of, I haven't lived here quite as long as Paul has, but I'm catching up. And we need to, that kid that graduates from IUR, where does he or she go? If they can afford to rent an apartment. So those are things that we got to look at. It's great to see the stores doing great business. It's great to see all these things happening in Woodstock. But think down the road what we become if we're not a diverse town. That's all.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Your name?
My name is Kate.
Kate.
I live in Bakersfield. And I grew up in Austin, Texas, and I've watched that town.
Here, take this one. Try that.
I grew up in Austin, Texas, and I watched that town grow exponentially without much thought to planning. And the traffic there's a nightmare. And their public green spaces are overrun. And as this area becomes more population dense, we need to keep in mind public green space accessible in the area. in town so that it's not just cars and houses and business.
Great, thank you. Yeah, another point, a result of the first comprehensive plan effort in 1962 is Andy Lee Field and the green in the village. Green space in the town. I've witnessed other towns just from afar who were developing very rapidly, and all the farms were being sold to developers, and then they had no green space in the town because they used to be a farming town, and now they have nothing. You know, so our town thought about this, and way years ago, when they were concerned about the population, created some space. But there's more in that area as well, that more effort that we could do for sure. Thanks for bringing that up. John, did you? No? Okay. Did you? Yes.
Is there a way to police loud motorcycle noise in town?
Well, we can ask our chief about that, but I don't know the answer to that, but we could certainly make it. It's been noted. One more comment to you, but we'll come back and make sure the others first. David, we'll come back to you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet today? Okay.
Okay. Laura Rose again. I'm noticing that, when I look at old plans of the planning board, I live in Xena, and I've been there for about 10 years, and the older language and laws that the planning board was supposed to speak of included planning for parks. They said that, there's more people here. We need more green space, more protected space, preserved space, places for families. This language has gone out of what people are looking at when they look at new applications. Why are we moving away from preserving and not keeping those? I hope that those kinds of considerations are put throughout the comprehensive plan. Because as she said, if you just develop an area and you don't leave room for green spaces, you look at, California, people can have ring roads of recreation and, let's see what we have and plan for the future.
Duly noted. Thank you. Who was else that had their hand up? Somebody. David.
There's one other thing I failed to mention earlier is the importance of the arts organizations. Without the art museums and galleries and music venues and theater, I don't think this town would have nearly as many visitors, nor as many residents. Because there are a lot of artists who work out of their own studios, who show at Wham or the Guild or something, and we have Birdcliff up here, which is world famous. And it's been well written with very famous people. So I think that really has to be underscored multiple times about the importance of arts organizations in Woodstock.
More than just the emblem of our town, right? Which acknowledges the arts community of our origin, of our town. Maxine? By the way, Maxine is the president of Woodstock Planning Conservancy.
Or executive director.
Executive director. Sorry, not the.
Patty Goodwin is the president. So I think somebody made a comment about the high schoolers. Somebody. Oh, you did. Richard. So it occurred to me, is there value in trying to get some high schoolers together and do some in-depth interviewing about their thinking about why do they stay in the area and not stay in the area? Like, what are the impediments? What are the, appeals? I have 2 children graduating this year from high school, and my daughter's ready to take off, and my son loves the area. So how many, I think part of it isn't just about what's in the area. I mean, anyway, the point being, can we get more data about that? And then the second piece is, anecdotally, we hear, or I'm hearing, and it's anecdotally, 30-somethings are becoming the new weekenders and buying here. I don't know how true that is. But taking various cohorts that might be buying second homes, is there again an opportunity to do more in-depth interviewing to get some sense of their own trends and thinking? I mean, there are plenty of people here who are weekenders who love to be in both places. Living here full-time isn't necessarily for everyone as wonderful as a place as it is. So I think maybe if we can get more data, it might be helpful.
Thank you.
Just to that, we've in the past, we've done, we have an adult meeting like this, but we've also gone to the schools and had kids workshops, not necessarily focused on the high school to college to empty nesting transition, but just to say, you know, kids, what's missing in town. And sometimes you'll get, you know, flying elephants or something. But it's good to get their perspective because they look at things entirely differently in some cases.
Great. Iris.
I'd actually like to see better enforcement of the zoning laws in town because, especially in the hamlet, I think we could improve the aesthetics of the town if the zoning laws were better enforced.
Great point. Thank you. To your point.
Can I just add about the school? I like the idea of going to the schools.
Yeah.
But also just, I don't know what percentage of Woodstock is in the Sovereign School District, so if you keep in mind to also go to the Sovereign School District.
It's only the Kingston and...
So you go to all of them.
Right. Okay. We'll come back to you. Anybody else? Before we lose you. All right. We're going to have a couple more comments. Hold on one second. I have a question to the director of the evening.
I'm booked.
You're booked?
I'm booked tonight, so
you're here to say.
as long as people are, or unless we're getting kicked out, as long as people still have comments.
Okay, great. All right. So just doing a time check. That's what I was doing.
My only last comment is about the really educational opportunities for families. I'm a Xena resident, and now we have kindergartners getting on the bus for the first time and riding 50 minutes unsupervised to school. This does not appeal to the second homeowners who may say, you know, I love it up here, but I don't want to send my kids out to Boyceville or to Kingston or to Socrates. I'd like to have educational opportunities. We do have a closed school. We have one remaining that hasn't been sold off. We have the Hurley School. I mean, maybe we could create some local educational opportunities that would encourage families to actually live here year-round and invest in their community. Thank you.
You would come?
No, I just want to make sure there aren't people who have this vote.
Is there anyone else? Going once?
Yeah, as in general, I mean, as I mentioned, we did have the questionnaire. We usually double up with that in case, because some people are shy and they don't want to get up and talk. I don't think that's a problem here.
Well, there's the questionnaires that Michael's referring to.
Yeah.
So I noticed that some of you are working on those. Please leave those with us.
Yeah.
And we'll incorporate them as well as we're doing here tonight on the audio side. And in the future, if you want to take it with you tonight, and then you can make it available. We'll bring it to the town hall of the Como property, and
Town offices.
the town office, excuse me, the town offices, and it will be brought to the hands of the community, of the comprehensive plan committee. The other thing I wanted to say is that there'll be ongoing opportunities for people to make comment, both online. We have our own email address, which is you'll see it in a moment, and we have other means for you to reach out to either Behan directly, Michael directly, or myself directly, or other members of this committee. So I encourage you to keep the communication going. All right, and we'll do everything we can to respond to you as best we can.
Just say, it's Woodstock NY.
Yes, there's a typo. This is what happens when I make a
He
change.
added that. He added that in there just last minute. So, editor. So, Richard, one more.
One last thing.
Yeah.
Just to that point, I remember talking to Jeremy Wilbur about this last summer. We put the inventory committee together. And his fervent wish, and I think it is for most of us, this really has to come from the community. This cannot come from your town board members, including me. This cannot come from your zoning people. We can all advise and agree and help, but this really has to come from the community upwards through Kurt's committee, which is doing an incredible job, and trying to keep transparency going and make this as open as possible. So please, if you've got neighbors and friends who weren't here tonight, get them here at the next meeting. Make sure they're involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, tell your friends and neighbors.
Yeah. And part of the reason for this, as I think I mentioned, is to try and get everyone together just to introduce this and help spread the word. But as always happens, you go to events like this, and then you get home, and a couple hours later you think of something else that you wanted to say. You know, at any point, you know, after tonight, as we're working on this, if you have, you think of something else you want to add or another comment, please send it to either Kirk or myself, and we will make sure that it's, you know, it's included. And, you know, anything we're getting at this point is going to be basically going into the part one part of it. But that general idea extends throughout the course of this project over the summer. If you have comments, or for whatever reason can't make one of these meetings, feel free to send it in.
Thank you, Michael. I think we should wrap it up. What do you think? Yeah? All right, we did it. Yeah. We wanted to wrap it up. Well, everyone's going to run out, but thank you so much for coming here, and thank you for your openness and your comments, and we look forward to seeing you around town.
Do you need help on the